Okay, so something really interesting is happening under the surface of Australian politics, and a brand new poll just threw it right into the spotlight. We're going to dive into a recent Sky News segment that tries to make sense of some numbers that are so dramatic, they could be signaling a huge, permanent change in how things work.
So the whole conversation gets started with this bombshell, a new poll out of South Australia. And look, we're not talking about some tiny little swing here. These numbers are so wild, they're being called a political earthquake, and they're basically turning everything we thought we knew about the state's voters completely on its head. All right, let's get into the actual numbers. The Australian Labor Party, the ALP, they're sitting at 37%, but that's after a huge 11-point drop. The real shocker, though, is what's happening on the other side. One Nation has just exploded to 22%, and in doing so, they've leapfrogged the Liberals, who slumped down to just 20%. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. A so-called minor party is now polling higher than one of the big guys.
And that 22% for One Nation, it didn't just creep up over time. Nope, we are talking about a massive 15-point surge. This isn't just a few people changing their minds. This is a huge slice of the electorate making a very loud, very clear statement. And it seems to have happened incredibly fast. A jump like that doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? There has to be a reason. So what on earth is causing this political shockwave? Well, the analysis on Sky News points to a really powerful feeling that's been brewing among voters for a long time. According to the commentators, the core reason is actually pretty straightforward. This whole surge isn't really about some complicated policy disagreement. It's about emotion. It's about people feeling deep down that they're just being dismissed. And this quote from the segment just hits the nail on the head. You see, the argument goes that for years and years, whenever everyday voters brought up their worries about issues like migration, the major parties didn't really listen. They just brushed them off. The message from the top was basically that these concerns weren't valid, they were just populism. Which brings us to that word populism. The commentators suggest that maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. They're arguing it's not some dirty word. In their view, it's just a political movement doing what the big parties have seemingly forgotten how to do. Actually listen to what people are worried about and speak to those concerns directly. So if the big parties are dropping the ball, what's the right way to handle this? Well, the analysis points back in time to a kind of playbook written by a former prime minister, John Howard. And when you put the two approaches side by side, the difference is, well, it's night and day. The argument is that when a similar kind of populist energy bubbled up in the past, John Howard didn't shy away from it. He met it head on. He didn't tell voters their concerns were wrong. He acknowledged them. And this, the analysis says, is the exact opposite of what the Liberal Party has been doing more recently. This was Howard's famous line. And here's the kicker, according to the source. This line wasn't cooked up in some back room by a marketing team. It was supposedly spontaneous, but it just perfectly captured how the public was feeling. It was this clear, strong statement about national control that connected so deeply with people, it arguably set them up for a decade in government. So, flash forward to today. With these kinds of polls hitting the headlines, you've got to ask, is the current Liberal leadership finally waking up? Are they starting to realize they might need to change their approach? And it kind of seems like it. This recent quote from the shadow treasurer Angus Taylor is being seen as a really big deal. The commentators on the segment really seized on this, calling it a big leap forward. It's got that same decisive, Howard-esque language, and it signals a much, much tougher public stance. Okay, but hold on. A tough-sounding line is one thing. But is it enough? The commentators pretty much immediately poured some cold water on the idea. After all this time feeling like they haven't been heard, are voters really going to be won over by a few new words? And that's where we get to the real heart of the analysis, right? The massive gap that can exist between what politicians say and what they actually do. It's all about rhetoric versus reality. Here's the crucial point. The commentators' reaction was pretty much, yeah, we've heard this song before. They argue that for this new tough talk to have any meaning at all, it has to be followed by new tough policy. Voters, they say, aren't going to be fooled. They'll be looking past the speeches and looking at the one thing that really matters, the actual immigration numbers. If those numbers don't change, then all of this is just hot air. And that leaves us with a big final question. Is this incredible surge for One Nation just a temporary protest vote? You know, a flash in the pan from voters trying to send a message? Or are we watching the beginning of something much bigger, a permanent realignment of Australian politics?
According to this analysis, the answer isn't going to be found in the next press conference. It's going to be found in the policy, in the numbers, in what they actually do.